Welcome back to another video, everybody. I've got a guest with me today. Caroline, my lovely sister.
Hello.
Is visiting me. If you've seen my videos before on YouTube, you will know Caroline from the Tamba videos. Very beautiful Tamba embroidery, and she's made those for us. And we've done a couple of sketchbook videos as well. So Caroline is back here today, and we're going to look at some embroidery design. Now, I've already made a vlog on how I do an embroidery design. If you haven't seen that yet, my Indian elephant in 2 parts, so one about the design and one of me stitching it. I'll put a link to that up here. Somewhere here. Do check that out. But that's very much the way I do it, and Caroline has quite a different process to me. Equally as valid, there's lots of different ways to approach it. So I thought it'd be really good to have a look at the way that Caroline does it. So I set Caroline a brief, so way back in March 2020, just as we went into lockdown. If you're watching this in a couple of years' time and you don't know what I'm talking about, that's great, it means it's all over. But we, in the UK, we went into lockdown in end of March, and I said to Caroline, it would be great if you could give me a design that I could put for free on my website. Lots of people are starting stitching for the first time, some are picking it up again, and it'd be great to give them some designs. So I just said, if you could do me a design, and my only criteria really was that she used some of the items in the shop, just to see what sort of things you can make out of what we sell in the shop. Thought it'd be really exciting just to see what you could do with them. So make me free design using some stuff in the shop. So Caroline's going to tell us what she did.
So Sarah set me this brief, so some parameters there already. The fact that it had got to be a design, free design to hand out to beginners in embroidery, so small, not too complicated, a straightforward design. But I needed more parameters than that, and we've taught art and design at the Royal School of Needlework. I'm still teaching drawing and design classes there, and something we've realised is really important is that you have some boundaries for the design. So I chose a theme, and we went away just before lockdown. We had a family trip to Hunstanton, Sarah, Mum and I. Sarah and I did quite a bit of painting, photographs, looking around and drawing, and I decided I'd use that as the theme for the embroidery.
Should we have a look at the...
So let's have a look at one of my drawings.
Yeah. And we'll have a look at the drawing that probably inspired you, really, if I can get the book open. So this immediately says seaside, beach to me.
Yeah, now one of the interesting things there was the beach was a very particular sort of texture. It was very crunchy, which I talk about. I made a short video in lockdown about the start of the process, and I talked there about some of the impressions that I had of the place. And this is a drawing of what the sands looked like when the tide had gone out. So it looks very abstract, lots of flowing lines, and this is a watercolour sketchbook.
So we've got all the sand here, and this is the water coming in, and the horizon line across here.
They made really fascinating patterns, and on the left here, that darker paint is where there's some rock sticking out of the surface, but the sand is really, really smooth and a bit shiny, in contrast to the beach, which is really, really crunchy.
Okay. So you mentioned the little video that you made, so we'll have a look at that now, and then we'll come back and have a look at the finished piece.
Just showing you here how I am going to try out my idea. So I got some drawings here that I made while we were on holiday before the lockdown in Hunstanton in Norfolk. Here's my design. So I've got the wreck that's on the beach there, the way that the waves and the water comes in across the sands, and I thought this would make a really nice simple embroidery design. So I've worked out the line drawing there, and this is on tracing paper. I've taken a copy and I've pricked it, so there's the pricking, and I'm just going to test out some stitch ideas. So here I've got little drawings here of the sorts of textures and effects I'd like in the finished piece. So I've written bias stitch here for the boat, perhaps the filling in for that. And there were a lot of shells on this beach, so a lot of texture and different colours, because it's also sandstone of different colours there. There's pink sandstone. I actually have some of these here. There's the pink, there's the white, and lots of shells, razor shells, and some very strange, I don't know what they are, these things with lots of texture. And that's my impression of that beach, really, that the surface of the beach was rather like this all over, with lots and lots of razor shells and clam shells and different things, pebbles of different colours. So how am I going to get that? I'm thinking a mixture of bees, bugle bees, little seed bees, perhaps of different sizes. Thinking of perhaps some scroll stitch, maybe some of the different coloured metal threads in here to catch a light, like the way that water would catch the light. There's my horizon there. Not sure how I'm going to do that at the moment, so I'm mocking it up on a piece of white cotton. Here's the cotton, and I've drawn on it with ink sticks, ink tent sticks. So there they are. Really quick way for me of getting the drawing down there and trying different effects. This is still wet at the moment, so when it's dry I'll iron it just to make sure that that will fix all the wet colour, and then I can try out some of these sample stitches. But I also have found some fabrics that match these colours, and I've applied those to some calico. So before I get going on that, I'm going to mess around on this. Quite often for me, what starts as a sample becomes a finished piece of work, so it'll be interesting to see what happens in this case.
So this is the finished piece. So what did happen, because this looks like the sample in the video and not the finished thing.
It's both. Now what happened here, and I said in my little clip before that quite often the samples I make end up being worked to a finished state, what I think of as finished. And that's what happened in this case. So I got involved in trying out the textures, experimenting with things that you'd sent. So we've got all different materials here.
And then you can have a look.
Yeah.
There we go.
So I wanted a matte effect on the hull of the wreck here that's on the beach at Hunstanton. So I used woolen threads, Lana threads. It is actually rusting metal. So I used some shiny metal threads to give an indication of that. I had a great time with the crunchy texture on the beach with these metal scallop shaped sequins, interesting leather sequins that had really the texture of the beach. So I went for a lot of different textures here. There's Lana thread again in bullion knots, French knots of different sizes, and in the water we've got the blue opal and the white opal threads that you have in the shop, and this Indian smooth blue pearl there as well. And you can see the painted background in there, which I'm going to demonstrate in a little while how to do that. Now, people have asked us questions about when does something turn from being an observation of what's there, you're doing your research and you're drawing, you're taking photographs, and when does it become an invention? When do you start changing it? A great question. So what do you think?
Well, I take things quite literally. I draw a shape and then I stitch it. You a bit more of a thinker, aren't you? Because I know what happened with this piece especially is you look back at the photographs that I took, didn't you? And then you've got Caroline, I'll have to say this now, Caroline loves boats and wrecks especially. Ever since we were little, if there was a wreck, it was always off exploring the wreck. And I think Caroline had, just because I know her, I can say this, had quite a romantic idea of what a wreck looks like. And I'll actually find a picture of what this wreck actually looks like. I'll put it up now. You can see it here, and it's not quite what Caroline did. So, but that doesn't matter. That's quite interesting. So you don't have to literally do what's in front of you, especially if it's sort of a little bit rusting and disappearing into the water. It's not maybe as interesting. It doesn't maybe look like a wreck. You have to hunt around a little bit more to see what it is, because there was lots of things sticking out the sand, wasn't there, that wasn't quite sure what that bit was. And Caroline's made it a little bit more of a sort of a beached boat, really. It's definitely a wreck. So I quite like that you didn't consciously do that, I think, did you? But you just sort of took this idea of what it was and these experiences and emotions from the beach and put them into the piece. And then when you look back at the photos, it wasn't quite how you remembered it. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, and that's fascinating, because I did make a line drawing of the wreck. I've got a little outline which we can show you. There's a small pencil drawing of that, which I thought was accurate to what I saw. And I didn't look at Sarah's photographs of the beach and the wreck till after I'd completed this. And I was sort of shocked to see that it looked totally different to my impression and what I'd remembered. And a lot of what I remember has gone into this. So the texture of the beach in particular, it was unbelievably crunchy and covered in razor shells, all these different shells, and which you broke when you stepped around the beach, and it had rocks on it. It was extremely lumpy and heavily textured. So there's the sounds of it, the feel of it underfoot. And I guess that also shows the difference between this and your photo, shows the difference between our perceptions in recording that in drawing and taking a photo, which doesn't really select. It just shows you what's there, depending on how you control the lighting and all the rest. That's the skill of photography. For me, capturing it in some pencil lines, it focused on what mattered to me.
What
and
you
what
found interesting about
what
it.
I found interesting.
So it wasn't really a conscious decision to make it a bit more romantic or to change things. It was a sort of quite a natural process for you.
And I think that's why I don't like working from photos in general, because they interfere with my own perception of what was there. So I know I have something that doesn't look like potentially what's on the beach if we could go back and look at this. But it has a feeling of, it's quite roughly worked. It's got a feeling of crumbling. The thing was disappearing in the sand.
Yeah, it was, yeah.
So that was really what I was out to get.
Because this has turned out, if you don't mind me saying, quite neatly, hasn't it? So the wreck, even though it's obviously a wreck, this is the prominent part of it. And you've worked it quite neatly. But just talk about, this was the sample that got turned into the actual thing, which is something Caroline does a lot.
I don't think I'm going to do it. I think this is a sample and then I'll work another one, but I don't.
See, all our samples always come out beautifully. So, and I was like, use a bit more fabric. But you did try and make a proper one, didn't you? So just tell us what, and we'll put a picture up of that as well. Started, because you didn't finish it, did you?
No, and I don't think I will, because I started again. I'd chosen the fabrics that I mentioned in the clip I made earlier in lockdown. I'd applied them to another piece of fabric. I'd drawn out the hull of the wreck and I've started to stitch it, and it was so neat. I felt like all the life had gone out of it.
Right.
So there's something about the spontaneity of this process for me. I want to get a feeling or something, and I can't repeat it.
Right. So it's almost too contrived, isn't it? You need to go with your emotion of the time. And if you try it again, you've lost that momentum, maybe a little bit.
Because the piece I'd started to work on as the proper piece, if you like, didn't have any painting on it yet. It had got applied blue and applied silk fabric. And I was bored with it already.
I remember sending me pictures of, I don't know what to do with it.
And you know what? It's still on the frame, but when I get home, I think I'm going to bin it.
Take it off the frame.
Yeah, bin.
It is just interesting to think about that, though, because it is something Caroline actually does a lot, is in her beautiful samples, they end up being lovely pieces in themselves, because that's the way that Caroline works and develops them and adds to them. But you often don't do them on fabric that's big enough, do you? So you might find you've run out at the edges, or it's a bit of a weird shape, and then there's a frantic, how do I make this into a finished thing? So it's worth having a little bit of a bigger piece of fabric, even if you're messing them out, just in case it turns out to be a masterpiece.
She's always telling me that.
So a bigger bit of fabric. Well, I think it's worth it, just for the sake of a little bit more fabric. And if you do get something that's beautiful, then
The trouble is, you don't know when something good's going to happen.
Well, no, you don't. So you might use a lot of fabric.
And I think the learning for me is that perhaps I hanker after or think I should have that very ordered process of drawings, working samples, line drawings, and then a piece which draws from all of that experience. But that isn't how I do it, and I suppose it's acknowledging that and going, I'm going to work on this. This is the finished thing, give myself plenty of fabric so that I can finish it, because finishing these little pieces is really hard. There isn't enough fabric to fold them round and mount them on board and all the rest. So for me, recognising what is the process that suits me and working according to that, letting go of an idea I should be doing it a certain way.
Yeah, yeah.
Because in fact the same processes are happening. We're researching, we're collecting information, whether it's drawings, photographs, sounds, smells, impressions. We have a knowledge and experience already of stitches and materials and how they work to some degree. And you don't have to sample everything from the beginning, do you?
No, especially if you've got a bit of experience about what techniques do and what materials do. You have some idea of how they're going to work anyway, don't you? You know, you've sort of got an idea of how it's all probably going to pan out. Or some idea.
Yes, you know how they handle, and so I use these paint sticks a lot. I draw a lot. I know how that's going to work out.
I think your drawing comes into your designs a lot, doesn't it? So you sort of almost drawn this one first, haven't you? And then work the stitching on top of it. So it's almost like putting the drawing in place, and then the stitching is the final sort of touch almost with yours. Do you think?
I think the stitching is a response to the drawing, and the drawing is becoming increasingly important, and the stitch more and more of an embellishment or an addition to the drawing, rather than, so it's drawing led probably for me. Yeah.
So quite a different process to the process that I use, although we do both do drawing, but I probably do it a bit more literally, which probably is similar to our characters, I think, isn't it?
Yeah.
Really, it probably comes out in that.
Yeah.
So what we thought we would do now is we love little look at backgrounds in embroidery, because sometimes they get a bit forgotten, and sometimes you might not want one, but sometimes you might think, oh, that looks really nice, how on earth do I do that? So we thought we'd just show you. If you could just pass me that one. I just want to show you this one that I did a while ago. Just as an example of a background that I did for a piece. So this was, I think it was titled, can't remember now, hold on to me, but it was about the Swarovski crystals, basically. So you had to use these crystals in the project, and this is what I did, and I sort of used a foamy beach. So this is the sand here, and this is the deeper sea over here, and these jewels are getting washed up. This is called All Washed Up, I think I called this piece, and these jewels from the bottom of the sea have all been washed up onto the shore, and I painted this background. So this is watercolour paint on just a calico cotton backing, and I put some salt on it. You can see the effects of the salt here and here as well, and then I put a little bit of gold and silver painting on top, just sort of picked out some of the shapes. I think this might be a bit of something pressed onto it, maybe a bit of cling film or something like that, I'm not sure, something pressed onto it. And then I did, as Caroline just said, about using the stitching to embellish the thing underneath, embellish the background, and added some stitching and a few spangles and beads just to highlight it. So that's a way that I have used the background, and it's quite freestyle for me, this, and I really loved it. I really loved doing this piece. So that's how I did it. Let's take that away, and Caroline's going to show us how she did it on, well, you're not going to show us that beach, but you're going to show us that style using the drawing from the sketchbook.
I am.
Yeah. So I will clear the decks a little bit, and we'll set Caroline up, and she's just going to do a quick demonstration on how she would approach that.
So I'm going to take you through how I created that painted background for my Hunstanton wreck sample, and I'm going to work from the little watercolour sketch that I have of the beach textures there, because I love the shapes in this that are occurring, this beautiful blue sweep and then these other lines coming in. I'm going to use ink tent sticks. These are made by Derwent. I've got a colour card here which I made to help me identify them, because in stick form you can't necessarily see what they're going to come out like. So I've chosen the 4 that I'm going to use, 2 earth colours and 2 blues. I framed up a piece of calico on a silk frame with drawing pins, and I've got the sticks and a number 10 round watercolour brush and some water and a bit of tissue just to mop. And I'm going to just draw on here with the sticks. So let's take the blue one. I'm looking at my drawing and I'm going to go straight on here. Now, one of the reasons I like these is because I love drawing with things in my fingers. I like that more than drawing with a brush in a way. So I'm copying the shapes, if you like. I'm working from the shapes in my drawing, but it will change because I'm working now from my drawing and not from what's in front of me in a scene. So this is another place where things can start to change and evolve. So it'll look potentially quite abstract. Now let's put a bit of water on there. And you can see I'm not doing it carefully, particularly. I'm working quite fast. It's a loose kind of technique that I like. And to wet this calico also I need to splash the water about a bit to actually get it to run and to move about. So let's take one of the other colours. Let's go in a little bit with some of the yellow now. So now I'm creating just some of the sand textures in there. And I can see, looking at this, that some blue stitching on top of this, looking at my original sketch, will add to that texture of the water flowing in and out. And I'm going to add the second earth colour I've got here. So I've got a yellow ochre and then something like a raw sienna type of colour. Now there are numbers on the ink tent sticks, and you can see online a palette of the different colours. So just looking at that, there's a band of kind of rock going through there. Let's add a bit more water and just splash that about a bit more. Calico is a good material to practice on, but I use white cotton fabric for the wreck sample piece, which is going to give brighter colour slightly, because it's a nice pure white. So I'm drawing over it again, and you can see that when it's wet, it looks quite different. It behaves differently, and I find this kind of fun because I don't really know quite what's going to happen as I do this. And the drawing line, I really like it. I really like the look of a drawn mark. Now I'm going to carry on and take this up to the top so that I have an entirely complete painted frame, if you like, to work on, or painted background. Because the other issue I had last time was that I stopped short in one area and had less paint on that, which became a reason for having to mount it in a round hoop in the end, because I didn't have enough stuff on the corner. So I'm going to make sure there's some stuff right to the edges this time. Oh, look at that colour there. Now I want a little bit of this dark blue. Cool, now it's looking quite exciting. You can get these in pencil format as well, which I might well use at this stage for getting some slightly more subtle marks. And the other thing I would possibly do is work on a really big piece of fabric. Okay, now let's just final check in with my picture. I'm going to add a little bit more of the brown there. Some very interesting colours in the sand there, where different rocks have shifted, and it's a famous geological site for the different layers in the rocks and what they're composed of. The colours are really quite amazing. I'm going to leave it there, I think. So it's looking quite different already to my sketch, and I'm going to take this home and do something else with it.
That was really interesting. That was quick as well. Super duper fast. Do you normally work that fast?
Well, yes, and that's what this gives me, the spontaneity that I really value and that I can't really reproduce. So you can see, I suppose, in that working method why it ends up the way it does.
Yeah, and then if you try and do it all nice and neatly, how it loses that spontaneity.
Yeah, I wouldn't get that.
Because if we just have a look at what you've done, it's quite different.
Yeah.
And I suppose this is a cream fabric, and this is white, so you can see how bright this sort of has come out, and this is quite different, but it's got some really beautiful gestural marks on it. It's fabulous. So what might you do with this now? This is dry, yes? No?
It's not quite dry yet,
okay.
And you can obviously dry it with a hairdryer if you want to speed that up. The manufacturers, Derwent, claim that when these colours have been wetted and they're dry, they're then fast on fabric if you want to wash them. Check out their website for the data sheets and the information about that. But as a finished piece, this isn't going to get wet, so it doesn't really matter.
And can you iron it to fix it, or does that not?
I don't think it requires heat fixing. It just requires to have been wet. But you can see the way I've worked. There is some areas where I've worked dry, and it's given a slightly rough effect there. So it's possible that were this to be on a garment or something you wanted to wash, that wouldn't be sufficiently fixed. You'd have to make sure it was all wet.
Right, okay. So it's only once it's been wet.
Yeah.
So what might you do with this now? Where might your next sort of stage go with this if you were going to work on this?
Well, the interesting difference between that and the picture is that there's a lot more white in here, and there was a lot of light reflected from the water back from the sky. So I'd lighten it up, I think, and I'd look at introducing some textures. I really like this white opal thread.
It's really bright, isn't it?
It looks very bright, doesn't it? And I think lines of that working through here would give back some of the lightness. It would highlight it a bit, because the natural colour calico slightly neutralises the effect of the colours.
Yeah.
But those two textures, that soft and that bright and shiny, I really like the idea of playing with those on top of these colours. And it may well not make anyone think of a beach by the time it's finished, because it's getting more abstract.
Right.
Not intentionally so, but just that's a result of the process and the particular thing I've chosen.
Okay.
Really. So I will take this away.
I was going to say, are you going to finish it?
Yes. No, I think I've got some of this stuff left that you gave me.
And there's enough fabric.
Well, it might be difficult to mount it, so maybe I should mount it.
Well, it is already mounted in a way, so that's quite a good way of doing it, isn't it?
Yes.
You've gone to the edges, so yeah, you could crop it in.
Yes, I could, yeah.
Well, maybe then, if you're going to finish it, Caroline will either come back and show us what she does with it, or you can send me a picture of it.
Okay,
we'll put it somewhere finished.
Yeah.
If you want to have a go at the original design, wherever it's gone, it's disappeared now. Here it is, and that's free on the website. I'll put a link in the description below, and you can download that, and you can have a go at your own version, and you can paint all over it if you want to.
There you go, that's the original design.
So that design's free on the website. If you want to see what Caroline's up to, she's doing drawing lessons by Zoom, so it doesn't matter where you are in the world. If you want to have a go at some of these backgrounds, Caroline can teach you. We'll put a link to your website in the description below as well. Do you want to tell everybody what it is?
Yeah, so it's carolinehomfray.co.uk, and there's a page devoted to drawing, the drawing classes that I'm teaching at the moment.
So do check those out, because she's a great teacher, and like I say, you can do it anywhere in the world, which is fabulous. And if you've enjoyed this video, I hope you have enjoyed this little look into Caroline's process, because it's quite different to mine, so two different ways of doing something. Then do give us a thumbs up, like the video, that means more people get to see it. Click the subscribe button and the little bell to get notifications of when we upload something new, and do share it with your friends as well, and we hopefully will see you